Dear readers, today we will be covering A Man Called Ove, a well-known novel by Fredrik Backman, one of my favorite authors. This deeply moving and beautifully written story follows Ove, a grumpy yet lovable old man whose seemingly rigid life takes an unexpected turn when a lively young family moves in next door. Through humor, heartache, and the power of human connection, Backman crafts a touching narrative about love, loss, and the quiet yet profound impact we have on those around us. As we dive into this novel, we'll explore Ove's journey, his past, and how he finds meaning in life once again. This novel has also been adapted into a movie recently, but as any book lover would say, the book is always better. The novel begins with 59-year-old Ove, a grumpy and old-fashioned man attempting to buy a computer. Frustrated by modern technology, he dismissively refers to a tablet as an O-pad and grows increasingly impatient with the young shop assistant's explanations. When offered a laptop, Ove scoffs at the idea, insisting on a normal bloody computer. The assistant suggests a MacBook. Ove mispronounces it as MacBook, but the conversation only fuels his irritation. Annoyed by the mention of lunch, which he sees as a sign of society's misplaced priorities, Ove storms out without making a purchase. The second chapter flashes back to 3 weeks earlier, introducing Ove's rigid daily routine in the Swedish neighborhood he has called home for nearly 4 decades. A creature of habit, Ove wakes up at precisely 5:45 a.m. without an alarm, brews his coffee with exact precision, and sets out for his morning inspection of the neighborhood. He meticulously checks street signs, locks, and the guest parking lot, his deep distrust of change evident in every action. His routine, however, carries an underlying sadness. Once he shared his mornings with his wife, Sonia, but now she is only a silent presence in his life. Subtle hints reveal Ove's despair. He cancels his telephone service and newspaper subscription without fanfare, small but telling decisions. A more chilling clue emerges when the narrative notes he is putting up a hook, and he doesn't mean just any kind of hook. Ove is preparing to do something bad. Adding to his frustrations, he has recently lost his job. Work gave Ove a sense of purpose, and without it, he feels adrift. His disdain for the world extends to his new neighbors, a lively foreign family moving in next door. His irritation turns to outright hostility when they accidentally scrape their trailer against his house, disrupting his carefully maintained order. Ove storms outside to confront his new neighbors, Patrick, whom he disdainfully names as the lanky one, and his wife, Parvane. Patrick, a tall, clumsy man, is hopelessly struggling to reverse his car with a trailer, while Parvane, pregnant, short, black-haired, and assertive, shouts directions. Their foreign-made car has already crushed Ove's flower beds, further fueling his frustration. Enraged, Ove scolds them, declaring that this is a no-driving zone. When Patrick's failed attempt results in knocking over Ove's mailbox, Ove takes matters into his own hands. Ignoring the car's modern features, radars, sensors, and cameras, he parks the trailer using nothing but skill and experience, muttering that any man who needs such technology shouldn't be bloody driving in the first place. Just as he settles back inside, his doorbell rings. Standing there are 2 young girls, 3 and 7, holding a Tupperware container. Their mother, Parvane, has sent food as a gesture of goodwill. Ove, ever suspicious, assumes they are trying to sell it to him, but begrudgingly accepts. As the chapter closes, Ove's grief and intent become more evident. Sonia is gone, and the preparations he has made, cancelling subscriptions, tying up loose ends, all point to one thing. With finality, he reminds himself, tomorrow he's putting up that hook. Next day, Ove brings 2 plants, though he meant to buy just 1. At the store, a cashier insisted he use a coupon for 2 plants, and to avoid a small card surcharge, Ove reluctantly bought both, out of principle. On the way, he blocks a Mercedes driver from parking, only to accidentally help his new neighbors, Parvane and Patrick, secure the spot. Their gratitude irritates him. As he recounts these events to his wife Sonia, it becomes clear she isn't there. When he gently touches a boulder, the truth is revealed. He is at her grave. It has been 6 months since she passed. We get to know a bit more about Ove in his early life. Ove's mother died when he was 7, leaving him to be raised by his quiet but kind father, whom he greatly admired. His father worked at the railway, showing exceptional skill with engines despite never finishing school. When he repaired a railway director's car, he was rewarded with an old 92 Subh. As a teenager, Ove followed in his father's footsteps, working at the railway. One day he found a wallet at the same time as a troublemaker named Tom. When Tom tried to take it, Ove chose to turn it into the lost and found, earning his father's pride. At 16, Ove lost his father to a railway accident. He continued working for the railways for 5 years, until one day he boarded a train and saw Sonia. That moment marked the first time he had laughed since his father's death. Back to the present, Ove is ready. He has everything in order, his affairs settled, his coffee cup washed, even the undertakers paid. But once again, he is interrupted. First, he locks up an abandoned bike, only to be confronted by a teenage boy, Adrian, who insists he was fixing it. Ove argues it's a girl's bike, but Adrian's girlfriend, the owner, steps forward. She happens to be the daughter of the neighbors Ove dislikes for pushing the garbage sorting rule. Unbothered, Ove tells Adrian to fetch the bike from the shed. Adrian mutters "grumpy old bastard" as he walks away. Then Ove spots Blonde Weed, the young girlfriend of his jogging-obsessed neighbor Anders, throwing stones at a cat for attacking her tiny dog. When one of the stones lands near Ove's property, he snaps at her. She storms off, threatening to tell Anders. Left with the stubborn cat, Ove gives up and slams his door shut. Enough is enough. Now Ove decides it's time to end everything. Ove carefully prepares to unalive himself, laying out a plastic tarp and dressing in a suit. A letter in his pocket holds instructions for his affairs, but just as he's about to go through with it, his new neighbors interrupt. Again, Patrick and Parvane arrive with cookies, intending to introduce themselves. They bicker in front of Ove, and he finds himself warming up to Parvane, noting her intelligence compared to her husband. They also ask for a ladder, and as Ove fetches it, another neighbor, Anita, appears. She asks him to bleed the radiators since her husband, Rune, is too ill to do it. Ove, still bitter over losing his position in the Residents' Association years ago, refuses. The moment grows tense until Patrick notices what looks like tire tracks inside Ove's home. Anita explains it has to do with Sonia, Ove's wife. This is the first time her name is revealed. Hearing Sonia's name, Ove snaps. He yells at Anita to shut up and slams the door. Then, determined to end things, he hangs the hook, ties the noose, and steps off, leaving the chapter on a cliffhanger. We again go back to the past and understand more of Ove's life. Ove continues working at the railway after his father's death, seen by co-workers as quiet but reliable. One day money goes missing and suspicion falls on him and Tom, the same man Ove had clashed with as a child. Called into the director's office, Ove is asked if he took the money. When he denies it, the director presses him to name the real thief. Ove refuses. Tom, however, has already accused Ove and convinced 2 younger workers to back his story. Though the director knows Tom is lying, without Ove's testimony, the company must let him go. As the director prepares the paperwork, Ove stands by his principles. Men are what they are because of what they do, not what they say. Recognizing Ove's integrity, the director offers him a different job, cleaning night trains. It's during one of these shifts that Ove sees Sonia for the first time. Back to the present, Ove's attempt fails when the rope snaps, leaving him lying on the floor, more annoyed than shaken. Typical of Ove, he grumbles about the poor quality of modern rope. As he falls, his mind flashes to his longtime neighbor Rune. They've known each other for almost 40 years but have spent 37 of them arguing, though Ove can't even remember why. They were once friends, founding the Residents' Association together and bonding over their disdain for modern incompetence. But everything changed when Rune bought a BMW. To Ove, loyalty to Subh is a matter of principle, and he holds grudges against anyone who drives the wrong car. Still, as he lies there, he realizes he actually misses Rune. With that thought, he gets up, goes to Rune and Anita's house, and finally offers to bleed their radiators. The story moves to the past, and at 18, just a week after his birthday, Ove buys his first car, a blue Subh 93, selling the Subh 92 he inherited from his father to help pay for it. Meanwhile, his childhood neighborhood is changing, with wealthy newcomers whom he calls the Suits moving in. They want Ove and his rundown house gone, but he refuses to leave. The municipal council keeps sending letters urging him to sell his home for redevelopment. Instead, Ove takes matters into his own hands, learning construction to renovate the house while keeping his job as a night cleaner for the railroads. But his determination takes a cruel hit when a fake insurance salesman cons him him into buying a bogus policy. When a fire later destroys his home, Ove discovers he has no coverage. The fire starts in the house next door, and while the elderly couple escapes, their grandson is trapped inside. Ove has a choice: try to save his house or rescue the boy. He chooses the boy. As flames consume his home, firefighters arrive but refuse to act due to the politics of the neighbors and the associations who wanted him out. Ove watches helplessly as his house burns to the ground, stopped by a man in a white shirt who simply says, "Rules are rules." Ove, once again set on ending his life, this time via carbon monoxide poisoning in his Subh, decides to take one last inspection tour of the neighborhood. His plans are briefly interrupted by a white Skoda driving into the car-free zone, an act of rule-breaking that infuriates him. The driver, a bureaucratic councilman, ignores Ove's protests, having just visited Anita and Rune. Ove recalls that Anita had mentioned officials threatening to take Rune away to a care home. Back in his garage, Ove starts suicide attempt, only to be interrupted by frantic banging on the garage door. He flings it open so forcefully that it hits Parvane in the face, giving her a bloody nose. She urgently needs a ride to the hospital. Her husband Patrick has fallen off a ladder and is already in an ambulance, but she and the children couldn't fit. When she reveals she doesn't have a driver's license, Ove is bewildered. "How old are you?" For the first time, he displays genuine curiosity about his neighbor. Parvane threatens to take the bus instead, triggering Ove's disdain for public transportation. Ultimately, it's the thought of Sonia that sways him. He knows she wouldn't approve if the last thing he did in life was give a pregnant woman a nosebleed and abandon her at a bus stop. With a resigned sigh, he removes all traces of his attempt from the Subh and drives them to the hospital. In the past, after losing his childhood home to the fire, Ove sleeps in his Subh until men in white shirts arrive and pressure him into selling the now empty property. This fuels a deep hatred in him, something he had never truly felt before. His home wasn't just a house, it was where he grew up, where his father taught him about Saab engines. Left without a place of his own, Ove rents a room in a boarding house and continues his night job cleaning trains, though he quits construction work. There he unexpectedly crosses paths with Tom, the same man who got him fired from his first railroad job. One night while Ove is in the shower, Tom steals his father's watch. This becomes Ove's breaking point. Confronting Tom, he forcefully takes the watch back and punches him. Maybe it was because Tom had put the blame on him for the theft in the carriage. Maybe it was the fire, maybe it was the bogus insurance agent, or the white shirts, or maybe it was just enough now. Feeling adrift, Ove attempts to enlist in the military, believing its structure and discipline would suit him. However, a medical exam reveals a congenital heart condition, making him ineligible. Once again, he's met with "rules are rules," leaving him more despondent than he has been since his father's death. Then just months later, everything changes. He meets Sonia. And then there was no more peace and quiet for Ove. The story moves between past and present, one depicting Ove's early life and one in the present with the neighbors. Coming to the present, on the drive to the hospital, Ove is forced to keep the Saab's windows rolled down despite the freezing weather, an unavoidable consequence of his unfinished attempt. Upon arrival, he immediately clashes with a parking attendant, refusing to pay for hospital parking out of sheer principle. Inside, Parvane leaves Ove in charge of her daughters while she checks on Patrick. Ove, utterly clueless about handling children, stares at them like a detective about to launch a murder interrogation. The situation only gets more absurd when a hospital clown Beppo approaches. The clown asks for a 5-crown piece for a magic trick, but when he tries to swap it for a different one, Ove, seeing it as yet another attempt to swindle him, punches the man. By the time Parvane returns, her daughters are buzzing with excitement over Ove's outburst, while Ove sits under hospital security surveillance. The 7-year-old almost justifies his reaction, muttering he was no good at magic anyway. Back at home, Parvane takes note of the plastic tube on Ove's garage floor and the lingering exhaust fumes, piecing together what he had been trying to do. Instead of confronting him directly, she hands him a task, bleeding the radiators at her house, and Ove agrees. The next chapter flashes back to the moment Ove first meets Sonia. After finishing his night shift, he sees her on the train and, wanting to make a good impression, borrows a conductor's spare trousers and shirt to avoid looking like a train cleaner. When he sits beside her, she greets him, and despite their contrasting personalities, she loves talking while he prefers silence, they get along. Years later, she would admit she found him puzzling, but was drawn to his muscular build and kind eyes. Sonia, a student training to be a teacher, takes the same train daily. Ove, infatuated but hesitant, lies and says he's in military service. For 3 months, he sits near her each morning, making no move. Growing impatient, Sonia takes charge, instructing him, "I'll be waiting here tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock. I want you to be wearing a suit and I'd like you to invite me out for dinner." When the evening arrives, Ove wears his father's old suit. After dinner, he confesses the truth. He's not in military service, but a night train cleaner. Expecting anger or disappointment, he braces for her rejection. Instead, she reveals she already had figured out. When Sonia asks what he truly wants to do in life, Ove says he wants to build houses. Days later, she surprises him at his boarding house with brochures for a distance learning course in engineering. Encouraged by her belief in him, Ove completes the exams, securing a job at the housing office, the same one he later loses. Their love story unfolds, leading to marriage and a shared life, though Sonia's eventual passing remains a mystery for now. In the present day, Ove is attempting his plans again, this time by jumping in front of a train, but as always, interruptions foil his plan. First, his card doesn't work when trying to purchase a ticket. Then the train is delayed. Just as he prepares to jump, chaos erupts. A man on the platform suffers a stroke or seizure and falls onto the tracks. While others panic, Ove is the first to act. He jumps onto the tracks, lifts the man out, and then remains facing the oncoming train, determined to go through with his plan. But at the last second, he sees the train driver's face, a young man barely 20, whom older colleagues likely call the puppy, just as Ove's co-workers once called him. This realization stops him. There's a right way of doing things and a wrong way, he decides. He jumps away just in time, muttering, "And so this day is also ruined." Returning home, Ove spots the white Skoda, officials from the council planning to take Rune to a care home. He then crosses paths with Anders and Blonde Weed, who mock him. Blonde Weed cruelly warns Ove that he'll be next and flips him off before speeding away. Furious, Ove wants to chase them, but suddenly his pulse races and he's out of breath. His heart is acting up. As he arrives home, he notices something unusual. A snowdrift by the shed has a distinct cat-shaped hole in it. He realizes there's likely a cat buried underneath. The story goes back to past, and this time we see Sonia's perspective. She had always loved 3 things unconditionally: books, her father, and cats. She had a big farm cat named Ernest after Ernest Hemingway, and she adored him. She had plenty of suitors before Ove. Her friends couldn't understand why she chose him, always saying he had been a grumpy old man since childhood. Ove knew people wondered the same thing, but unlike the other men, Ove looked at her like she was the only girl in the world. Their love worked despite their differences. Sonia was full of life, teaching children with learning difficulties to read, even Shakespeare. Ove, on the other hand, refused to read a single Shakespeare play, but he spent hours building her bookcases, making sure they were perfect. When she told him she loved him, he just nodded. Sonia's mother had died in childbirth, and she was raised by her father, a quiet man who lived in the forest. When she brought Ove home for dinner, her father barely spoke to him. He didn't trust men from town, but then Ove noticed the old truck in the yard and offered to fix the engine. That changed everything. Later that evening, her father asked if Ove knew how to fish. When Sonia said no, he simply replied, "Then he'll have to learn." That was his way of saying Ove was good enough for his daughter. Ove stands outside staring at the cat-shaped hole in the snowdrift. Before he can decide what to do, Parvane arrives and immediately takes charge. When he refuses to get the cat out, she does it herself and demands to bring it inside. Ove grumbles but lets her in. As she tries to warm the cat with blankets, Jimmy, the overweight young neighbor, suddenly appears. He heard shouting and came to check. Ove is horrified. First a cat, now 2 intruders in his home. The blankets don't seem to work, so Jimmy does something even more shocking. He takes off his shirt and presses the cat to his bare skin for warmth. Ove is speechless. His once quiet house is now filled with chaos. A dripping cat, an undressed neighbor, and a woman who refuses to leave. As Parvane heads into the kitchen to heat water, she stops abruptly. The counters are lowered and wheelchair tire tracks are still visible on the floor. Sonia's things are everywhere. Her hair clips, her little decorations, even her handwriting on post-it notes stuck to the fridge. The realization of Ove's loss finally hits her. She apologizes softly. Ove, instead of snapping, simply gets the water ready himself. When she rests a hand on his shoulder, he doesn't push it away. Jimmy interrupts, asking for food. Ove makes him a sausage sandwich. As he eats, Jimmy says, "You know, it was pretty bad with your wife, Ove. I always liked her. She made like the best chow in town." Ove, instead of brushing it off, quietly agrees. Yes, she cooked very well. The cat is still shivering, but Ove insists it's only staying until it's dry. Parvane argues that her kids are allergic, but Ove can tell she's lying. She wants him to keep the cat. Jimmy suddenly starts turning red, proving he really is allergic. Parvane declares they need to get to the hospital, and Ove, despite all his complaints, is the one who will drive them. The story shifts back to the past. Ove learns to fish, a skill that earns him silent approval from Sonia's father. The old man never says much, but Ove knows he has been accepted. Sonia's home is shared with a massive cat named Ernest. She adores him. Ove, on the other hand, isn't fond of cats, but for Sonia's sake, he puts up with Ernest's presence. Then tragedy strikes. Sonia's father passes away, leaving her heartbroken. She stays in bed for 4 days, lost in grief. Just when she starts to gather herself, another blow comes. Ernest runs into the road and is hit by a car. Sonia cradles the cat in her arms, and without hesitation, Ove rushes her to the vet, driving faster than he ever has before. He knows how much this cat means to her, especially now. Not long after, they bury Ernest by the lake, the same place where Ove had gone fishing with Sonia's father. As they stand by the grave, Sonia turns to Ove with unexpected news. She's pregnant. She suggests they find a home of their own before the baby arrives. Ove doesn't react with excitement or grand gestures. Instead, he glances at her stomach as if expecting some sort of sign, then nods. Practical as ever, he simply says, "We'll have to get a Subh estate then." Back in the present, Ove insists he won't keep the cat, but Parvane doesn't give him a choice. Begrudgingly, he takes care of it. The next morning, Ove takes the cat on his usual walk. The streets are still covered in snow, so Parvane's vet friend has given him tiny socks for the cat. Ove finds the whole thing absurd. A cat wearing socks? It can't be natural. Their first stop is the florist. As always, Ove buys Sonia's favorite flowers for her grave. The cat, however, is nothing but trouble. It keeps bothering him. To avoid further disaster, he takes it with him to Sonia's grave. Standing before the headstone, he sighs and introduces the cat, talking to his dead wife about the cat. Despite all his grumbling, Ove knows Sonia would want him to take care of the cat. He may not answer to anyone else, but he still answers to her. As he tells her he misses her, the cat gently rests its head in his hand. For once, Ove doesn't pull away. Ove and the cat return home, but something feels off. Rune and Anita's garage door is open, a rare sight. A glimpse into the past reveals just how close Ove and Sonia once were to Rune and Anita. It was Sonia, of course, who encouraged Ove to befriend Rune. Their lives intertwined. Anita and Sonia were pregnant at the same time, they shared meals, and when Ove and Sonia married, Anita and Rune stood as their witnesses. Back in the present, Ove arrives home to find a journalist, Lena, waiting for him. She wants to interview him about the man he saved at the train station, but Ove brushes her off. Then a white Skoda catches his eye, the council people. A man prepares to drive through the neighborhood, but Ove plants himself in the way. The man claims he has permission, but Ove isn't convinced. When Ove demands to know his purpose, the man admits that he wants to put Rune into the care home. This leads to an altercation, but Ove is shocked when the man calls him by his name, claiming to know a lot more about him. Both of them storm off. Back to the past, Ove and Sonia take a 1-week holiday to Spain after their wedding, with Sonia carrying their child. She insists on traveling by coach bus, calling it romantic. Ove doesn't see the appeal, but he has learned that what Sonia finds romantic is incredibly important. Spain, however, is not a country for Ove. When Sonia rests, Ove keeps himself occupied. He sees a man struggling to put up a fence, wrongly of course, so Ove takes over and fixes it. Another day he pulls a horse out of the mud. He even builds a new exterior wall for a church. He never tells Sonia any of this. Years later, when she finds out, she only smiles. People can say whatever they like about you, Ove, but you're the strangest superhero I ever heard about. On the way home, Ove feels their child kick for the first time. The sensation is overwhelming. His eyes sting, but he refuses to show it, grumbling something about needing the toilet. It was the happiest week of Ove's life, and the one destined to be followed by the very unhappiest. In the present, Ove's day once again is disrupted by other people. After his usual morning walk with the cat, he spots Lena, the journalist, approaching. Annoyed, he tries to avoid her by stepping into the garage. In his haste, he accidentally locks her inside while he and the cat remain outside. That's exactly how Parvane finds them. When she realizes what's happened, she makes a deal: if Ove drives her and her kid to the hospital to pick up Patrick, she'll get rid of Lena for him. She casually adds that they'd otherwise have to take the bus. Ove grumbles that this is blackmail but agrees. Before they leave, Parvane hands Lena her card, offering to discuss Ove later. On the drive, Ove waits in the car with the cat while Parvane goes inside. Talking to the cat, he mutters about Rune's situation, while Lena wonders why Ove is always angry. The past finally unveils the tragedy that shaped Ove's life. On the way back from Spain, Ove notices the bus driver smells of wine but dismisses it, assuming it's normal there. Moments later, Sonia lets him feel their baby kicking, a moment so overwhelming that he excuses himself to the back of the bus to hide his tears. That's when it happens. The driver, drunk, loses control and crosses the central barrier. Sonia survives but loses the baby. She remains unconscious for a week. Ove stays by her side, refusing to entertain the idea that she won't wake up. When she finally does, he is there to tell her the devastating truth. She gets heartbroken. She has not only lost her baby, but is now confined to wheelchair. She begins physiotherapy, but she will spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. Ove, however, has his own battle to fight. A woman in a suit, one of the white shirts, suggests Sonia should be placed in a care home, implying that Ove won't stay with her now. Enraged, he throws one of Sonia's shoes at the woman and then has to sheepishly ask the nurses where it landed. Sonia laughs for the first time since the accident. Ove pours his grief into their home, remodeling every inch of it himself. Meanwhile, Sonia completes her teaching qualifications and takes a job working with troubled kids, a job she loves. But Ove is consumed by vengeance. He floods the Spanish government, courts, and Swedish authorities with letters demanding justice. Finally, Sonia puts a stop to it. There's no space for life with all these letters of yours, she tells him. In the present, Parvane's persistence is beginning to crack Ove's walls. Driving home from the hospital, Ove is stuck with a car full of people he'd rather not be with. Parvane, Patrick with his cast, their little kid, and Jimmy. Naturally, inconveniences arise. The kid needs to pee, Jimmy is starving, and Parvane manages to convince Ove to stop at McDonald's. While everyone, including the cat, goes inside, Ove waits alone in the car. Parvane returns with a proposition. She wants Ove to teach her to drive. Patrick will be in a cast for months, and she needs someone to help her get her license. But it's clear she has an ulterior motive, just like when she insisted he take care of the cat. She's giving him something to do, something to care about. When they return to the neighborhood, Parvane hands Ove a drawing the kid made in the car. It's of everyone inside the vehicle, but while she colors everyone in black, one figure is drawn brightly. You're the funniest thing she knows, Parvane tells him. That's why she always draws you in color. The word always sticks with Ove. Later in the garage, he starts his Subh, staring at the plastic hose he once used in an attempt to end his life. It's the only logical thing, he thinks. He's been longing for it for a long time now. But then he sees the cat watching him, and he turns off the engine. Parvane's plan is working. Later, he visits Rune and Anita, looking for a sheet of corrugated iron. When Rune unexpectedly answers the door, Ove is momentarily stunned, more so when Rune actually recognizes him despite his Alzheimer's. Ove explains to Anita what he's looking for, and she lets him check Rune's old shed. Before leaving, he offers to help her with the radiators, showing a moment of compassion. Ove's world keeps pulling him back into life no matter how much he resists. At home, he's making bets with the cat on when the mailman will arrive, something he used to do with Rune and later tried with Sonia, though she never quite got the rules. This time, Ove wins and the cat loses. When he opens the door, he finds Adrian, the teenage boy from the neighborhood, who also happens to be a mailman. Their last encounter wasn't exactly friendly. It involved a disagreement over the bicycle Adrian was trying to fix for a girl. Now the conversation takes an unexpected turn when Adrian asks about Sonia. Adrian reveals that Sonia was his teacher, the only one who believed in him. She even got him to read Shakespeare, something no other teacher thought he could do. For a moment, the two, an old man and a teenager, stand in silence, kicking at the snow, sharing an unspoken bond over a woman who saw more in them than they saw in themselves. Finally, Ove breaks the tension, asking about Adrian's bicycle. When Adrian admits he has no idea what he's doing, Ove offers to help. Then, as if finally giving in to the world's insistence on keeping him busy, he heads over to Parvane and asks if she's ready for her first driving lesson. During Parvane's first driving lesson, Ove is horrified to discover that she doesn't even know where the clutch is. The cat, now his ever-present companion, sits in the back seat looking deeply concerned. The lesson is as disastrous as Ove expects. Things take a turn for the worse when they stop at a red light, and a jeep with two young men, their throats tattooed, pulls up behind them. When the light turns green and Parvane struggles to get the car moving, they start honking aggressively. Normally unshakable, Parvane becomes so stressed that she starts crying. Something completely out of character for her. That's when Ove takes charge. He steps out of the car, marches over to the Jeep, and pulls one of the men out, pinning him against the side. He doesn't even need to say much. The sheer force of his presence leaves the young man stunned. Back in the car, Ove surprises Parvane with a rare moment of encouragement. He reminds her of everything she's accomplished. You've given birth to 2 children and soon you'll be squeezing out a third. You've come here from a land far away and most likely you've fled war and persecution and all sorts of other nonsense. You've learned a new language. His words hit home and just like that, Parvane stops crying. The lesson continues. This chapter delves into the gradual unraveling of Ove and Rune's friendship, revealing that their falling out wasn't about a single incident, but a slow build-up of tensions. Ove can't pinpoint exactly when things soured between them, but Rune's decision to buy a BMW was the final straw. Before that, they clashed over various neighborhood matters, such as how snow should be cleared. Rune and Anita had a son who, as Sonia put it, was born angry. When he turned 20, he moved to the US and rarely looked back. At one point, Rune and Anita considered having another child, and Rune, ever the planner, bought a Volvo 265 to accommodate their growing family. But no more children came. One day, Sonia came home and told Ove that Anita had been to the doctor, implying that having another child wasn't an option. Shortly after, Rune switched to a Volvo 740, a 2-seater, a quiet acknowledgement that it would only ever be him and Anita. In response, Ove left a half bottle of whiskey on Rune's doorstep, a silent gesture of sympathy. Yet instead of bringing them closer, their unspoken grief created more distance between them. Maybe their sorrow over children that never came should have brought the 2 men closer, but sorrow is unreliable in that way. When people don't share it, there's a good chance that it will drive them apart instead. Parvane, now more comfortable with driving, takes Ove and the cat to the cafe where Adrian works. Ove has brought the bicycle to help Adrian fix it. Parvane is surprised to see Ove and Adrian getting along, showing how Ove is slowly integrating into the community despite his usual resistance. While Ove helps Adrian with his bike, Amal, the cafe owner, struggles to fix a fan heater. When Amal insists that the cat isn't allowed inside, Ove strikes a deal. If he fixes the heater, the cat stays. True to his word, he repairs it, and Amal, pleased, offers Ove a whiskey, which he declines. After leaving the cafe, Ove, Parvane, and the cat stop at the graveyard. Ove steps out alone to visit Sonia, telling Parvane that it has been chaotic. His life, once defined by strict routines, has been disrupted ever since Parvane and Patrick crashed into his postbox. At Sonia's grave, Ove reflects on their life together, longing for the structure and normalcy they once had. 4 years ago, Sonia received a cancer diagnosis, and the disease eventually killed her. Sonia found the strength to forgive God, universe, and everything, while Ove's grief turned into anger. Before leaving, he quietly tells Sonia that this time he really plans to go through and meet her soon. Back in the car, Parvane gently suggests helping him clear out some of Sonia's belongings. Ove's reaction is immediate and furious, showing how unprepared he is to let go, even as life continues pulling him forward. After going home, he goes for another plan to unalive himself, but yet again is interrupted by Parvane, tracking him down for a journalist, Lena, who wants to interview him. But before Ove can deal with that, he spots the white Skoda, the car belonging to the bureaucrats attempting to put Rune in a nursing home. Ove confronts them, and the councilman mockingly reminds Ove that he is well known in their offices for all the letters he wrote about Sonia's accident and illness. His dismissive attitude enrages Ove, but the bureaucrat condescendingly warns him to take care of his heart. In a small act of defiance, Ove blocks the bureaucrat's car with Patrick and Parvane's trailer. Yet despite this minor victory, Ove feels the crushing weight of inevitability. Men in white shirts always win, and men like Ove always lose people like Sonia. For the first time, Ove completely shuts out Parvane and allows himself to cry, signaling a moment of deep despair and exhaustion as he finally feels like he can't fight anymore. He seems dejected when Adrian brings his friend Mirsad, who was the cafe owner's son. Mirsad had came out about his sexuality to his father, and he had driven him out of home. Ove's initial response is to tell them that this is not a damned hotel. He then catches sight of one of the photographs of Sonia. Today was supposed to be the day that Ove finally died. Instead, he agrees to allow Mirsad to stay with him. Sonia would have liked it, most likely. The next morning, Ove wakes up to the smell of toast, something he hasn't experienced since Sonia died. Mirsad, now staying with him, is making breakfast. When Ove sets out for his usual inspection walk, Mirsad asks to join, and they are soon joined by Jimmy, who is trying to lose weight. During the walk, Jimmy reveals that Anita has been fighting the government for nearly 2 years to keep Rune at home. She originally requested more assistance, but instead, officials decided Rune should be moved to a care facility. Ove is shocked to learn how advanced the process is and realizes Rune could be taken away any day. Determined, Ove marches to Anita's house and demands the government papers. He is ready to fight. Ove brings a deck chair to Sonia's grave, ready to talk for a long time. He reflects on past events in the neighborhood, including when he and Rune took action against troublemakers, like the time Rune planted drugs to get rowdy tenants arrested, or when they teamed up to stop Jimmy's mother's abusive boyfriend. Now Ove tells Sonia that he must fight again, this time to stop the government from taking Rune away. Unexpectedly, Anders, the divorced neighbor, helps by secretly towing the councilman's car, which had been blocked in by Parvane and Patrick's trailer. The councilman is furious, but Ove plays innocent. Soon after, Anita receives an official letter confirming Rune's transfer. Ove declares there's a bloody war on and prepares for battle. Ove is ready for battle, and the whole neighborhood stands with him. When the councilman arrives with nurses to take Rune away, Anita firmly refuses, backed by Ove, Parvane, Patrick, Jimmy, Anders, Adrian, and Mirsad, all offering to help care for Rune. Their final move comes from Lena, the journalist, who has dug up dirt on the councilman. With a few well-placed hints about bank statements and search histories, she forces him to back down. To Ove's surprise, the man leaves without a fight. They've won. As the others leave, Ove stays behind with Rune. They sit together in silence, and for the first time in years, Anita hears Rune laughing. The past no longer matters. Ove visits Amel at his cafe, accepting the drink that was once offered to him. The two men sit together, both carrying unspoken thoughts, one struggling with his son's choices, the other unable to turn away someone in need. Though their conversation isn't revealed, the reason for Ove's visit is clear. Earlier, Parvane had driven Ove to the cafe. She had mentioned how he had spent the previous evening with her family, reading a bedtime story to her little kid, and later spending time with her other kid too. As Ove reflects, he realizes that perhaps those two little girls weren't so bad after all. Ove visits Sonia's grave again, but this time he isn't alone. Parvane, Patrick, their daughters Jimmy, Adrian, and Mirsad accompany him, bringing flowers and greetings from Anita and Rune. Even the cat is there, as if part of the family now. Back in the neighborhood, Mirsad's father Amel waits at Ove's house. Instead of interfering, Ove has dinner with Parvane and Patrick, leaving the father and son to have their long overdue conversation. Before leaving, the little kid hands Ove an invitation to her birthday party, excitedly revealing that she wants an iPad. Ove, completely baffled, reacts as if she just spoke a foreign language. Earlier in the day, Lena had delivered a copy of the newspaper article featuring Ove. He had agreed to the interview in exchange for her help against the councilman, though he made sure not to smile for the photo. Before leaving, Lena casually mentions she has plans to go skating with Anders, hinting at a possible romance. After she's gone, Ove finally reads the letter she had been urging him to open. It's from the man whose life he saved, thanking him. The letter includes a photo of the man's family and a heartfelt message of gratitude. The man also reveals that an undiagnosed brain condition caused his collapse, meaning Ove unknowingly saved his life twice, once by pulling him from the tracks and again by leading to his diagnosis. Jimmy takes Ove to the same electronics store where Ove had struggled to buy a computer months ago. This time they're getting an iPad for the kid's birthday. Overwhelmed by the different models and specifications, Ove cuts the discussion short and insists on getting her the best one. When Ove gives the gift, the kid surprises him by calling him Granddad. He is caught off guard, standing in silence, absent-mindedly fiddling with his keys. Instead of staying for the party, he goes for a walk. During his stroll, he finally notices something suspicious in the neighborhood: 3 figures trying to break into a house. He yells and chases them, but his heart suddenly gives out. As he collapses, the last thing on his mind isn't fear or pain, it's making sure Parvane doesn't let the ambulance drive through the car-free residential area. Then everything fades to black. At first, it seems like Ove may have died from the heart attack, but he hasn't. Parvane and the neighbors rush him to the hospital, where she causes a scene when the staff won't let her go into the operating room with him. The bond between her and Ove has grown into something deep and unexpected. The doctor tells Ove that his heart is too big, a diagnosis that Parvane finds both hilarious and fitting. For someone who spent years shutting people out, it turns out his heart was never small to begin with. The doctor explains that while medication can help, his condition is unpredictable. He could have months or years left. Parvane, unimpressed, jokes that Ove is terrible at dying, which is true in its own way. Back home, Ove finds get-well drawings from the girls, one calling him granddad, and he proudly hangs it on the fridge. For the first time, he lets Parvene and her daughters help pack away Sonia's things, letting go of the past piece by piece. Then, as if marking a new beginning, Parvene goes into labor and gives birth to a baby boy. In the years after Ove's heart attack, life continues to change around him. Parvene finally passes her driving test, and her family thrives, now with their youngest son. Ove carries the boy's picture everywhere, proudly showing it off like any doting grandfather. Lena moves in with Anders, the Audi-driving man Ove once grumbled about. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Mirsad surprise everyone by getting married, with Amel, Mirsad's father, fully supporting them. At their cafe, Amel even names a sandwich after Jimmy. They adopt a little girl and become part of the ever-growing family in the neighborhood. Jimmy, true to his kind nature, takes the girl to visit Rune and Anita every day. Rune remains the same, but seeing the child never fails to bring him joy. 3 years pass and Ove takes Nasanin, Parvene's little kid, to her first day of school. He even owns a cell phone now, something unimaginable before. Then one winter morning, Parvene wakes to find the snow in front of Ove's house untouched. She knows immediately. Entering his home with her spare key, she finds him in bed, peaceful. The cat by his side dying a natural death. By the bed there's an envelope with her name on it. Inside are all the instructions for Ove's funeral and estate. Adrian gets the Subh. There's also a bank account with over 11 million Swedish crowns, left from Sonia's father's smart investments. Ove has set aside $1 million for each of Parvene's daughters and Jimmy's daughter to be given when they turn 18. The rest is for Parvene, who decides to use it to start a charity fund for orphaned children. At Ove's funeral, 300 people come, despite his wishes for none of it. He was never just Sonia's hero. By the end, he belonged to everyone. The book closes with Parvene showing Ove's house to a young couple. The woman is lively and charming, the man a little grumpy, just like Sonia and Ove once were. When the man asks about the garage, Parvene casually asks what car he drives. Straightening up, he gives her a look of unmistakable pride and says just one word: Subh. In the end, Ove's story is not just about loss, but about the quiet, often unseen ways love reshapes a life. He spends years believing his purpose ended with Sonia, yet life keeps nudging him forward, through a stray cat, a persistent neighbor, and a found family that refuses to let him be alone. His death, when it finally comes, is not one of despair, but of peace. He leaves behind more than a will or a bank account. He leaves behind a community that has been shaped by his gruff kindness, his stubborn loyalty, and his fierce sense of right and wrong. A Man Called Ove is not just about death or grief, but about how life refuses to stand still, no matter how much we wish it would. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't follow rules, it doesn't fade neatly, and sometimes it never fully heals. But life does not wait for us to be ready. It moves forward, pulling us along with it, whether we fight against it or learn to walk with it. Life, in all its unpredictability, never stops. It doesn't ask for permission to move on, and perhaps in the end, that is its greatest mercy. We will come back again next week with a different novel, maybe with a change of genre. Till then, make sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.